What is a miscarriage of justice? According to Norton 2007, a miscarriage of justice can only occur if a criminal conviction has been overturned by the appeal court, which does not mean to ascertain a person's culpability for the crime in question. It is merely a declaration that the original conviction is unsafe. This could be due to inadequate work by defence lawyers, non-disclosure of information by the prosecution possibly relevant to the defence, unsuitable force placed on the defendant by the police to confess, the fabrication of evidence, unverified evidence, or flawed scientific forensic evidence. A miscarriage of justice is not a declaration of innocence.
During 1975, Margaret Thatcher became the first female leader of the Conservative Party, and Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister of the Labour government. Britain was in a double-dip recession. The Yorkshire Ripper began a campaign of terror, sexually assaulting and murdering prostitutes, and the murderer known as the Black Panther was at large. The IRA were planting bombs all over the UK mainland during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It was the year Queen released their most recognised song, Bohemian Rhapsody. The Sex Discrimination Act was introduced in this year. There was an increase in child abduction, sexual assault and murder at this time, with the kidnap and murder of heiress Leslie Whittle, the sexual assault on Tracy Brown, and the abduction, sexual assault and murder of Leslie Molseed.
Leslie Molseed was an 11-year-old girl from Rochdale. On October the 5th, 1975, she went to the shop for her mother, and she never returned. Her body was found 3 days later on a ledge, 30 feet above a remote lay-by near Rushworth Moor. She had been stabbed 12 times in the upper shoulder and back. One wound penetrated her heart. Her body had been posed and the killer had ejaculated on her knickers, vest and skirt. Around this time, 4 teenage girls reported Stefan Kiszko, a 23-year-old local tax clerk, for indecently exposing himself to them the day before Molseed's murder, and again a month later. They claimed he had been stalking them for some time.
West Yorkshire Police formed the opinion that Kiszko fitted the profile of the person believed to have killed Molseed. Despite not having any criminal record, the police now pursued evidence that may incriminate him and ignored other potential leads, acting on their suspicions of Kiszko's peculiar lifestyle and allegedly finding soft porn and sweets in his car. The police arrested him on the 21st of December 1975. During questioning, Kiszko gave inconsistent accounts of the relevant days which were taken as a demonstration of guilt. After 3 days of intense questioning, Kiszko confessed, believing that because he had done so, he would be allowed to go home and subsequent investigations would prove his innocence. During questioning, Kiszko did not have the automatic right to a solicitor present during interviews, and the police did not ask if he wanted one. He repeatedly asked for his mother to be present, and he was refused permission. The police did not caution him until long after they had decided he was the prime and only suspect of the case. After his admission of guilt, Kiszko was charged with murder on Christmas Eve 1975 and was remanded to Armley Prison, where he stayed until his trial on the 7th of July 1976.
Significant mistakes were made by Kiszko's defence team. On the first morning of the trial, the Crown produced thousands of pages of additional unused material, but no adjournment was sought. Kiszko was diagnosed with a condition called hypogonadism, which may have made him behave unusually due to testosterone injections he needed to treat this. Kiszko's specialist would have confirmed his treatment could not have caused him to act in such a way that would make him commit murder. Defence never called a medical expert to give evidence. The defence undermined Kiszko's claim of innocence and destroyed his alibis as they offered an admission of guilt to a lesser charge of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. His innocence could have been proven at the trial. The pathologist who examined Molseed's clothes found traces of sperm heads, whereas a sample police had taken from Kiszko contained none. Due to his condition, he was medically incapable of producing sperm heads. Further medical evidence revealed Kiszko had broken his ankle months before the murder. This, accompanied with the fact he was overweight, meant he would have found it almost impossible to climb the slope to the spot where Molseed was found. These two pieces of key medical evidence were never disclosed to the defence team or the jury.
Kiszko took the stand and gave evidence that he had never met Molseed and therefore could not have murdered her. He claimed he was with his aunt in Halifax at the time of the murder, visiting his father's grave. He stated that the confession had been bullied out of him by the police, claiming he said what they wanted to hear to release the pressure, believing if he had admitted to the crime, they would continue with their investigation, find his confession to be false and release him. On the 21st of July 1976, after 5 hours and 35 minutes deliberation, his conviction was secured by a majority of 10-2. He was given a life sentence. The judge praised the girls who testified against Kiszko, claiming his indecent exposure, for their bravery and honesty for giving evidence in court and their observational skills. He further praised the police on their great skill on bringing justice to the case and recommended commendation for the officers involved.
Kiszko was transferred to Wakefield Prison and placed on Rule 43 to protect him from other inmates, as he was now a convicted sex offender. An appeal was launched, but dismissed in May 1978, as no grounds were found to suggest the conviction was unsatisfactory. Whilst in prison, Kiszko was repeatedly attacked by other inmates. In 1979, he developed schizophrenia and suffered from delusions. Over the next 11 years, any claim of innocence by Kiszko was labelled as delusional. In 1983, he was told if he continued to deny being a child killer, he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. His mental state deteriorated, and in June 1984, it was recommended by a forensic psychiatrist that he should be moved to Broadmoor or Rampton Hospital. This recommendation was ignored until eventually in March 1991, Kiszko was transferred to a secure mental unit under Section 47 of the Mental Health Act 1983 on the grounds of deteriorating mental health.
Kiszko's mother protested her son's innocence but was consistently ignored by politicians and the legal system. In 1984, she contacted human rights organisation Justice, who at the time examined potential miscarriages of justice. 3 years later, she was introduced to Campbell Malone, who was a solicitor who agreed to look into the case. Malone contacted Philip Clegg, who had been junior defence counsel during the 1976 trial. Clegg had conveyed his own doubts regarding the confession and conviction at the time and following 2 years, and they prepared a petition to the Home Secretary to be sent on the 26th of October 1989. Coincidentally, a new Home Secretary was announced the same day. This was David Waddington, who had been Kiszko's defence barrister. It took 16 months for a police investigation to begin into the conduct of the trial. In February 1991, Malone, along with Peter Jackson, a private detective, finally pressed the Home Secretary to reopen the case, which was then referred back to West Yorkshire Police. Detective Superintendent Trevor Wilkinson was assigned to the case, and immediately he found several obvious errors. Kiszko's innocence was demonstrated significantly through medical evidence. Forensic reports from 1975 were proven to be unreliable because Kiszko was diagnosed with hypogonadism, rendering him incapable of committing the crime. In addition to the medical evidence, Kiszko's alibi of being in Halifax with his aunt was confirmed following Peter Jackson's investigation, having found witnesses who were willing to testify and confirm his whereabouts on the day Leslie Molseed was murdered.
In February 1991, the girls who accused Kiszko of indecent exposure admitted they had given false evidence, stating that they lied for a laugh, thinking it wouldn't go as far as it did. It became apparent they had actually seen a taxi driver innocently urinating behind a bush on the day of the murder. Further examination of the documentation produced at the original trial found a signed admission from the taxi driver confirming that this was the case. In August 1991, D.S. Wilkinson referred the case to the new Home Secretary following Waddington's resignation, Kenneth Baker, who passed them directly to the Court of Appeal. February 1992, the judicial investigation into Kiszko's conviction began. After hearing the new evidence, Lord Chief Justice Lane cleared Kiszko of the crime on the grounds of him being unable to produce sperm heads, which meant consequently he could not have been the murderer. Lane ordered his immediate release from prison and a full independent inquiry was launched.
But the years of incarceration had taken their toll on Kiszko's physical and mental health.
It's been a nightmare situation, to be honest with you. Prison's been very difficult. The whole situation in the police station was a very difficult one, and the whole situation just has been intolerable.
He struggled when he came out. He had a lot of difficulty coping.
I feel angry towards the police, the way they handled all of this.
Why?
Because they should never have arrested me. They should have arrested the right person.
People were extraordinarily nice with him, and the nicer they were, the harder he found it, because it brought it all back.
What are your hopes now for the future?
My hopes for the future are to get married, go on holiday and enjoy my life as much as I can.
Despite it being obvious Kiszko was innocent, the police and forensic scientists refused to apologise. Because Kiszko needed further psychiatric treatment upon his release, he remained in hospital, finally being allowed home in May 1992. He became a virtual recluse and showed very little interest in anything and anyone. His physical health deteriorated and he died of a major heart attack on the 23rd of November 1993, aged 41. His mother Charlotte died 4 months later. After his release from prison, he was awarded £500,000 compensation for his wrongful imprisonment, but died before he was due to receive it.
In 1994, senior officers in charge of the original investigation and the retired forensic scientist who gave evidence in the trial were charged with perverting the course of justice by withholding evidence in Kiszko's favour. The case was challenged, and in 1995 the presiding magistrates agreed to the challenge, and the case was dismissed without conviction.
If you're over the age of about 30, the name Leslie Moleseed may be familiar to you. Her face became a poignant symbol of child murder.
In February 2003, Max McLean used a television appeal to publicly announce the existence of the DNA profile for the first time.
All we need is a name. After 28 years, we will never have a better chance of catching the killer of Leslie Moleseed.
That was hugely successful in terms of public response, but of course it didn't give us the name of Ronald Charles Edward Castry.
Since 1990, Castry had been running a comic book shop in Ashton-under-Lyne. At the time, his chosen business raised no suspicions, but his motives have now been cast in a new light.
We wonder whether that particular type of occupation does give him access to children and to the world of fantasy.
It was his cover. He was a well-known businessman, respected, but then he had a dark secret.
In 1976, he had been charged with a sexual assault on a 9-year-old girl, less than a mile away from where Moleseed's body had been found. He was fined £25 for his crime and released. In 2005, Castry was arrested for the alleged rape of a prostitute in Oldham. When arrested, a DNA sample was routinely taken. Whilst he was not charged with that offence, his DNA profile was retained in line with new legislation. When the profile was entered onto the police database, it was found to match the DNA from sperm heads found on Moleseed's clothes.
Are you Ronald Charles Edward Castry?
I am.
Right, listen very carefully to what I've got to say to you now. You were under arrest for the murder of Leslie Susan Moleseed.
You're joking.
Between 12 noon on Sunday, the 5th of October 1975 and 06:45 a.m. on Wednesday, the 8th of October 1975. Do you understand the caution?
Yes, I understand the caution.
Your arrest is necessary for the prompt and effective investigation of the offence.
It's ridiculous.
On the 12th of November 2007, Castry was found guilty of the murder of Leslie Moleseed and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 30 years. West Yorkshire Police finally apologised for Kiszko's imprisonment, saying it was a dreadful miscarriage of justice.
Measures have been put in place over recent years in an attempt to eliminate any possible further miscarriages of justice and further protect the public and the police. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 is an Act of Parliament which provides a legislative framework for the powers of the police in England and Wales, and provides codes of practice for the exercise of these powers. The aim of PACE is to provide a balance between the powers of the police and the rights of the public. Under PACE Code C, Section 1.7b, a person who is mentally vulnerable is entitled to an appropriate adult during questioning, in addition to the right to free legal representation. As PACE was not enforced in 1975, there was no safeguard to protect Kiszko. PACE Part 5, Section 77 states that in order for a confession to be valid in a court of law, it must be made in the presence of an independent person. Again, this was not the case for Kiszko.
Another power given to the police under PACE is in Part 5, Section 62, which gives the police authority to be able to collect intimate samples with reasonable grounds. This includes blood, semen, any other tissue or fluid, urine, saliva, pubic hair or swab. Further authority is given in Section 64ZN of Part 5, which states DNA profile can be used for the purposes relating to investigation of an offence. This includes storage of profiles on a national database. The qualifying offence for this provision are listed in Part 65A, including murder, rape and child abduction. Had these two powers been available to the police in 1975, they would have had the DNA of Ronald Castry on record following his first arrest shortly after Molseed's murder.
In addition to PACE, in 1997, the Criminal Cases Review Commission was introduced as a result of the Criminal Appeal Act 1995. This body reviews possible miscarriages of justice in the criminal courts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and where applicable refers cases to the appeal courts. Sadly, this is all too late for Stefan Kiszko and his mother. However, now legislation is in place, hopefully miscarriages of justice may become a thing of the past.